The girl who was a princess always behaved like a young man, and was not ashamed of it at all. There were moments when everyone around her was afraid of her and did everything she wanted. Bursting into the hall where the meeting was taking place, she was very indignant that everyone had gathered, but she had not been invited. Princess Melody Norbella said that she had made a great effort to find them all. The young men who were present were not at all pleased to see the princess and wanted her to leave the hall. Prince Demos considered the girl to be a simple servant's daughter who had burst into the status of a princess, and should be grateful to everyone for that, rather than behaving in such a manner. She believed that the prince was always angry, but she did not consider it necessary to pay attention to him. She also tried her best to annoy him by addressing him as her brother, knowing that he didn't like it very much. She enjoyed behaving this way every time, so she even decided to sit down at the same table with them and take part in the meeting. While no one was paying attention to her, she decided that she could talk about her brother, who had gone for a ride in his own carriage. The young man was very upset that he had caught the girl's eye, and now she suspected that he had started gambling again. Emperor Urbas did not like this very much, but decided to deal with it a little later, as there were many matters to resolve. The kingdom began to develop rapidly after the war on the eastern borders. There were mountains there, but nothing serious had happened recently. At the meeting, it was discussed that the kingdom of Orson had arranged a marriage with the kingdom of Xerox, and from that moment on, they became allies. So hasty decisions were very dangerous. Those present also understood that a political engagement could be very helpful to them, and therefore it was necessary to consider the marriage proposals from the Eisen Empire. The princess was very happy when she heard that the topic of engagement had come up, because she had been working towards this for a whole year. The emperor immediately noticed the princess and saw that her eyes lit up when she heard about the proposal of marriage from one of the princesses. Without thinking twice, she raised her hand and was ready to be sent to that kingdom so she could get married. But the prince was totally against sending that crazy girl away. He had never taken her seriously. The girl refused to listen to him and believed that she had the right to marry a foreigner. It was a great opportunity for her. The emperor listened to her ramblings for quite some time, but when his patience ran out, he simply ordered everyone to shut up and take their seats. He later ordered the young man and the girl to leave the hall so that he would not see them again, and continued with the meeting. The princess was very calm and understood that it was better to leave the hall so as not to bring any more trouble upon herself. So she immediately decided that she would tell Claire, her maid, all the news. While taking a bath, she recalled all the details of what had happened in the hall and was sure that no one except her brother had dared to call her crazy in front of her father. She laughed and was sure that she had done so much that now no one would want to marry her. As soon as she finished her bath and tidied herself up, she was ready to go for a walk, but her maid begged her to return before dark. Claire understood that if the princess did not appear by the appointed time, she could be in serious trouble. The girl was sure that the captain of the guard suspected something, as he had even increased the patrols on the walls. When it was time for dinner, she thought it would be nice to get together as if everything was normal between them. But she still had to get ready and show up even though she couldn't eat or drink at all. The main thing was her presence. So she decided to quickly change her clothes and attend the dinner, as well as tease her brother, with whom she had quarreled that morning. Melody was determined to become the craziest flower in the entire empire, so the first thing she did was cut her long hair, then put on pants, and having lost her femininity, gained freedom. Now she could often be seen lying on the grass, or she could run around the estate for no reason, so everyone around her tried to ignore her. The girl liked wearing pants more than anything else, and she didn't even need to tighten the belt. She decided that the time had come to reap the fruits of her labor, so she headed for the estate. A young, attractive young man was the captain of the guard. Everyone considered him a handsome man with light hair. His face was very handsome, and there were even rumors that Princess Daisy had fallen in love with him at first sight. She also looked at him tenderly and knew that he would belong only to her. The captain's assistant immediately said that the emperor was very angry, that he had even broken the table in his rage. But their conversation was interrupted by the princess, who immediately introduced herself as Melody Corbel. As soon as the girl saw his beautiful eyes, she immediately knew that this man was the best choice for her. They were both pleased to meet each other, and the princess really wanted to shake his hand, but decided to just stay friends for now. She immediately heard the boys talking about her, so she immediately made herself known and was dissatisfied with their behavior. But after a moment she began to laugh and said that since she was in a good mood, she could forgive them. But the young man was actually very nervous and understood that the princess could take revenge on him at any moment. Upon entering the estate, Melody immediately noticed a new statue standing in the middle of the large room. She had never seen anything like it before. She began to behave terribly again, although there were moments when she did not like such behavior, but she could not do anything about it. Empress Roche waited for the appearance of the girl who could never do anything right and made everyone wait for her. Suddenly the door opened and Melody appeared. With a smile on her face, she immediately told everyone that she had overslept, and that was why she was late. His Majesty Ubrak had 2 empresses and 7 children. Empress Matilda gave birth to Crown Prince Nigel and Princess Rose. Empress Roche gave birth to Demos and Kyson, as well as Princess Daisy and Lily. 3 years ago, Princess Lily left the estate for a political marriage. The girl thought that there were no problems in her family, except for one small thing, namely herself. The princess immediately greeted Rose and told her that she looked beautiful as always. She also couldn't help but praise the Empress's painting, which was simply wonderful. Her brother was not thrilled that his sister was late for an important meeting again and was already expecting her to put on another show. The Empress couldn't help but remember that the girl had ruined the meeting and that Demos had also been kicked out. The Emperor was tired of listening to everyone arguing again, so he ordered them to stop. But as always, Demos couldn't help himself. He really didn't like that she just showed up at their family dinners like that. Then the Emperor himself couldn't hold back anymore, as he had been trying to put up with Melody's antics for a long time. He warned her that if she did something like that again, he would definitely kick her out of the estate. She thought about it for a moment, but soon brought up the subject of a political marriage, to which the Emperor reacted quite angrily. He screamed in a voice not his own, telling her to get out and never mention marriage again, and that he never wanted to see her at such gatherings again. Everything turned out exactly as she wanted, and she was grateful to her brother for that. Their evening did not end well, and the Empress even lost her appetite. She knew that the Eisen Empire had proposed a political marriage and that His Majesty had no intention of refusing such an offer. His Majesty the Emperor tried with all his might to marry off all his daughters to foreigners, without thinking that this was simply selling his own children. The Eisen Empire was a country of savages who rode wild horses. That is why the Empress was worried that they would have to give up one of their own for an engagement with that empire. But Melody was first in line, and the Empress understood that if she were in the Emperor's place, she would never do such a thing. 3 years ago, they had already married off their daughter Lily, and only because she was the oldest. Now the woman was sure that if she did not give Melody away in marriage, then the Emperor would choose her daughter Rose, and she categorically did not want that. Melody was cheerful as always, and now that she was in her room, she wanted to rest a little, as she had not even had time to eat dinner. The maid knew this would be the case, so she prepared a few sandwiches for her and decided to leave her alone. She thought about how she was at a very good age to get married, but her maid informed her that His Majesty had no intention of marrying her off. When she wrote down all the names of her brothers and sisters, she realized that they were all named after flowers and music, but her name did not match her skills at all. Then it seemed to her that it all started with her engagement to her sister Lily. On the night she was sent to her husband, she couldn't stop crying. The girl left the empire with red eyes. Melody understood that she was next, and she had no influence to change anything. Since she could not prevent the engagement itself, she decided to do everything to ensure that they would not even think about her marriage to some foreigners. The girl apologized to Rose in her thoughts, but it was Rose whom she wanted to send to the Eisen Empire. Although she managed to avoid a political engagement, marriage was still a problem for her. She understood very well that in that situation she could not remain without a husband. It seemed to her that His Majesty was ready to give her away to some aristocrat, and then she began to think about who could be suitable for this role. The only son of the Duke, who was the best graduate of the academy, the youngest captain of the guard, and the youngest master swordsman. This was enough to consider Nazar the best husband in the empire. Then she rejoiced that this was a good chance to fulfill her dream and be with him. But she also knew that if she was sent to another empire, Rose could marry him instead. Meanwhile, the captain's assistant was trying to figure out which of all the princesses he could choose as his wife. But the man immediately ordered him to shut up, as they were in the imperial estate and had to think carefully about what to say. They immediately moved on to important matters, especially the reinforcement of the entire territory of the imperial estate. He knew that every night the guards noticed someone escaping the city, but then returning. That is why he wanted to warn the patrol. The young man noticed someone strange with a hood on his head, but when he heard the voice, he immediately understood who it was. Of course, it was Melody, who had come again to visit her uncle, whom she had not seen for a long time. When the man looked at his niece, he saw how much she resembled her mother, and this could not but please him. And the girl saw her reflection in him, as they were, after all, relatives. She really enjoyed spending time with him. While she was tasting delicious cookies, she immediately wanted to tell him that she had succeeded and Rose was being sent to the Empire of Savages. But he noticed that his niece was very upset about it and wanted to know why. She also wanted to gather as much information as possible about other countries, even though her empire didn't want anything else from her. Then Melody said that she was doing everything for the sake of peace, the empire, and the greatness of her family, which greatly frightened her uncle. She was convinced that the entire empire and their family should live happily, and she was trying to do everything she could to achieve this. Once they had agreed on everything, her uncle told her that he was ready to support her and help her in any way he could. He stood by the window and watched his niece leave, confident that she was becoming more and more like his sister. The emperor had once married Jibril's sister and paid off all their family's debts. Therefore, the princess's family was only freed thanks to her sacrifice. That is why the woman asked her brother to do everything in his power to protect her child and help her. As soon as the girl found herself near the imperial estate, she knew that she had to wait until the guards changed and then continue on her way. But the wind began to pick up, and she could not hear anything that was happening above her. As soon as they got to the top, a guard was waiting for her, who was very surprised to see that it was Melody. The young man immediately began to attack her with the intention of killing her. She decided that she had to run away quickly and hide in the mansion so that no one else would find out about her. Suddenly, she heard the young man calling for help to deal with the offender. A swordmaster appeared before her, and she knew for sure that he could not be defeated, no matter how hard he tried. The captain asked his assistant to calm down a little, but the princess was already ready to cut his throat. Everything got out of control, and the young man managed to wound the girl. She immediately fell to her knees and clutched her wound. It seemed to her that time had stopped for a minute, and the wounded girl tried to get to her room. As soon as Claire saw her mistress, she didn't know what to do, because there was blood everywhere. The maid asked the princess to hold on, but she kept explaining that her energy flow had suddenly failed her, and that was why she couldn't cope. Claire helped as best she could. She knew that the wounds had to be closed quickly, but the problem was that Melody had left traces of her blood. The captain understood that this was the flow, the ability to use the inner strength of a person and the power of nature. As soon as it was over, the captain's assistant was ready to report everything and also report the criminal. But the captain was against it. He knew that the criminal was wounded and could now be found by the blood trail. When he realized that this was Princess Melody's estate, he simply could not believe what was happening. The blood trail ended right there, and there was nothing else around. Therefore, the assistant decided that there was someone else there with the criminal. Claire watched all this and could only pray that they would not find anything else. Of course, the captain told the emperor everything, but explained that they had lost the criminal, although they hoped that he could not have gotten far, as he was wounded. The young man added that the wounded man was bleeding profusely and trying to use the energy flow. As soon as the emperor heard all this, his expression changed dramatically, and he ordered the investigation to be stopped immediately. The man was convinced that all the people who played an important role here knew perfectly well what a bad person was around them, but did nothing about it. Fortunately, he still managed to see a very small part of what was happening behind the door, but that was enough for him. The workers who continued to do their work noticed that before they entered the woman's room, she was very frightened by something. As soon as the man entered the area, he immediately reported that the workers had told the emperor that he had come to see him and that he also wanted to visit the girl. Unfortunately, the worker informed him that the girl could not meet with him today because she was feeling very unwell. The man understood that he could not meet with the girl because she was indeed ill, so he did not want to insist on his visit. As soon as the man turned away, they immediately began to discuss him and simply could not believe that such a man had come to their princess. After a while, they decided to visit her again and reported that Kaiser had come to them again and wanted very much to see the beauty. But this only frightened her. The beauty was well aware that even if the worker sent him away, he would come back after a while and want to see her, so she began to prepare for the meeting. She also understood that she had to look her best to meet the man of her dreams, so the workers offered to help her. After a while, she put on a dress and noticed how beautiful she looked, so she was sure that she would make a good impression on the man. When he saw such a beautiful princess in front of him, he was speechless, and then the man was only able to say hello. The woman saw how the man was looking at her, and it was incredibly pleasant because now she was 100% sure that he liked her very much. But after a moment, she noticed a completely different look that began to scare her a little and stop their conversation, which she did not want to do at all. After they had talked for a while, he asked her if she was feeling okay because he thought she seemed a little tense. They also really wanted to know if she had noticed any strange people in the courtyard lately, but the woman immediately denied it. Looking at him, she began to feel a little nervous because she didn't like the man's cold and sharp gaze. After the man left her, the girl just sat quietly and wanted to rest because at first she thought the conversation would go completely differently. Later, a worker wanted to come in and ask how everything went, but when she saw the beautiful girl's face, she didn't want to ask anything. Holding her head in her hands, she said that the man actually thought that the girl was a woman who could steal some important data from the house. After this conversation with the worker, she decided that she had to make the man fall in love with her so that he would dismiss all his negative assumptions. When they had discussed everything clearly, the woman said that she would not tell anyone because it was part of their job not to say anything. After some time, she decided to tell her friend that she had received an order from the emperor, and the girl wanted to know what it was. When she found out that she just had to stay in her room and rest, she started laughing loudly. The worker who opened the doors for everyone was simply shocked to see such a beautiful girl. Some people tried to be very sincere in such an establishment and smile at everyone, but most understood that this was an insincere reaction. Important people simply did not want to look at such people because they did not understand what to expect from them in the future. The Duchess of Lan was very good at understanding such people and tried to stay away from them because they only talked about money. When they began to explore the area, they noticed that one of the dukes had brought an unfamiliar girl, whom almost no one knew in the area. Only then did everyone learn that she was actually Princess Melody, a very beautiful woman. But for some reason, people disliked her. The high-ranking individuals attempted to remain in their own company, and then they decided to approach the other participants and inquire about their well-being. Melody, in turn, knew almost no one, so she just quietly drank her drink and observed the atmosphere. At times, she was still afraid to remember her past events, because they were not very good and had a negative impact on her future. Realizing that all the most important people were already there, she decided to prepare herself a little to be ready for the conversation. After a while, she wanted some more of the cookies, but unfortunately, they were no longer on the table because she had eaten them all by herself. Soon, high-ranking people were again near her, observing the atmosphere very closely and noticing the girl. They were eager to see her with their own eyes, and the chief emperor asked her to come closer to them because he wanted to take a closer look at her. When she did not obey him, he repeated his request because he was convinced that the girl simply had not heard him. Then the workers bowed deeply to him, and he announced that the Melody was actually his own child. Today they saw each other for the first time, and the girl tried to behave politely because she wanted to make a good impression. In her mind, she was trying to come up with a plan to escape from this place, because she had no desire to stay with these people for long. She didn't enjoy such celebrations at all because there were many people around her, and it was very unpleasant for her. Then she realized that it was the right time to go get the cookies she wanted so much. But unfortunately, they weren't where the beautiful girl was. The man stood quietly in one place, thinking everything over and realizing that a month had already passed since his business, but he still hadn't found the thief who had done such bad things. Then a brilliant idea came to his mind, namely to think about whether Melody could have done such bad things, and at that moment he heard something. The man was convinced that there must have been many different people there that day, but security must have been lax, so he wanted to take advantage of this moment. As soon as he lowered his head, he saw a strange person who literally disappeared in a matter of minutes, and at that moment, he did not understand what was happening. This began to bother the man very much, and he understood that he had to somehow take advantage of this chance and still fulfill the task he had promised the emperor. Without thinking twice, he took a bold step and quickly jumped to see who was walking in front of him and wanted to catch up with her as quickly as possible. After the girl finally took her cookies, the man gave them to her with a big smile and asked her to run away as quickly as possible. All the walls the girl saw were completely wet, and she was surrounded by quite a lot of people, which she didn't like at all. After a while, she bumped into a man and then opened her eyes and noticed that it was the same duke who had recently come to talk to her. He remembered when he first saw Princess Daisy, who was an incredibly beautiful woman with light hair. But he was constantly watching a completely different person behind him who wanted to escape from this beautiful place as quickly as possible. After he had a quiet chat with Princess Daisy, he asked if he could go about his business, as he didn't want to lose someone. The woman was shocked to hear this, because her mother had asked her to establish contact with such a handsome man, and because of this, the lady began to worry. She could not refuse the man under any circumstances, and then he simply turned around and went about his business as quickly as possible. Melody was simply shocked to see the man next to her and did not understand what he was doing there at that moment. After a while, another person approached them and asked the man to leave the area as soon as possible and move away from the girl. As soon as the girl noticed that the stranger had taken out a weapon, she immediately started yelling at him and emphasized that he was her friend who just wanted to talk. Soon, a large crowd of strangers gathered around, curious to see how the story would end, but Melody didn't like it at all. Then the man, who genuinely wanted to protect the girl from the bad guy, apologized, but she understood that he wanted to take care of her as best he could. After that, she turned to the man and suggested that they talk in a completely different city so that no one would see them. When the young people found themselves in a nice place, the woman wanted to know how the man had recognized Melody when she was wearing a coat that completely covered her body. The man, in turn, remained silent and did not want to say anything because he wanted to listen to the girl. He tried to be polite and not interrupt the beauty, and after a while he finally began to express his position. The girl also added that she saw the man jump off a high cliff to get closer to her, and after that she started to run away. Melody begged the man not to tell anyone about this story because she didn't want anyone to know about it as it could damage her reputation. At first, the man didn't really understand what the girl was saying because it caused a certain dissonance that didn't match reality. Then she began to emphasize once again that she really did not want anyone to hear this story from him. Later, he decided to ask again if he was really talking to the person he needed so much at that moment. The girl simply agreed with every word he said because she understood that the man was telling the truth. She also fully realized that this was her life, and she had to do everything right and think things through carefully before acting. When they started talking about the girl possibly moving to another country in the future, she immediately rejected the idea because this was her home. Then he began to tell strange stories that he had talked to other men, and they emphasized that the girl really wanted to marry a foreigner. Hearing such stories, she began to laugh very loudly and immediately pointed out that this was not true, and then the man became a little embarrassed. The beauty remarked that if the man was so interested in what had happened, he could ask the Duke, who knew the girl well. He immediately refused because he understood that there was no point in lying to the girl now. Recalling past events in his life, he knew very well what kind of people there were in this world, so he tried to be very careful when communicating with others. Later, he wanted to discuss some questions with the girl because he knew that many men were standing at the border, and this made him a little wary. The girl was convinced that she would do a lot for her country, so she would try to support everyone who fought for it. After a while, she took the initiative and suggested that the man go outside to see how beautiful the sky was at that moment, and that it was also raining beautifully. Melody took him by the hand and wanted to lead him further so that he could see for himself that it was much more beautiful there than in the area where he had always been. He reacted rather strangely to her actions, but decided that he should just take it easy because he didn't see anything wrong with it. When the conversation turned to the girl's serious injury, she was surprised and did not understand how the man knew all this, but she did not want to talk about it too much. Later, when they talked a little more, she asked the man if he had any money. Unfortunately, the man did not have any money, so she decided to pay for everything but asked him to walk her home in return. The man began to feel uncomfortable but decided that he really needed to do something nice for the girl in return. So he offered his services as a man who knew the area well, realizing that they couldn't go through the main entrance. Looking at the man, she trusted him completely and was convinced that he was doing the right thing for her. All this time, he looked directly into the girl's eyes and realized that she had a beautiful smile that he liked very much. After they went for a walk together, the girl began to notice that the man also liked to smile back at her, although he did so very rarely. When they had walked for a while, the girl clearly wanted to know if the man would fulfill the request she had asked him to do. Hearing a positive response, she was incredibly happy and once again convinced that she had told this story to a normal person. Their walk did not end there, and they decided to continue walking somewhere else. And then he heard the girl ask him something. As it turned out, the beauty was incredibly interested in what the man did for a living and why he chose this particular field of activity. Not getting a specific answer, she decided not to ask any more questions, but she still wanted to know the truth. Returning to him, she took out her favorite cookies and offered him some, but at first he refused. When the beauty finally convinced him, he realized that the cookies were incredibly delicious, because he had never tasted anything better before. After they decided to end their walk, she suggested that if he had free time, he should invite her out again. Meanwhile, in another area, people were discussing the girl they had recently seen at the festival, and one of them suggested that the beauty resembled her mother. From the first moment, the woman disliked Melody and considered her to be a very bad person who always wanted to appear better than others. Her son, who respected his mother's opinion, immediately began to support her, although he actually had a completely different opinion but did not want to argue. Their family of dukes believed that, apart from their child, there was no better woman in the world, so they wanted her to marry a worthy man. The girl, in turn, was very surprised when she received a gift, but in return she also wanted to do something nice, but did not know what it would be. The maid, who always stood nearby, supported the girl in all her endeavors, but also wanted to know what the lady was planning to give. The beauty sat in one place for a long time and simply could not think of anything, so she decided to go to a meeting, but unfortunately she was very late. When she arrived, she immediately began to apologize to the girl, holding in her hands the long-awaited gift she wanted to give her friend. The girl was quite surprised that the beauty had not come empty-handed, and at the same time, it made her very happy. As it turned out, a few minutes later, the lady said that she was actually leaving for Eisen soon, and was incredibly happy inside. She never judged the girl's choice, but she was very curious as to why the lady went to meetings with her brothers and gave them some hope. She recalled all the past events of her life and was convinced that only ill-mannered people who did not know what they wanted did such things. The beautiful woman sitting opposite her also thought about this question, but unfortunately, she couldn't even give herself a clear answer. Bowing her head, the lady was very happy for her companion and was convinced that now the woman would live the truly happy life she so richly deserved. Her colleague listened quietly and even laughed at the girl at times, which began to annoy her greatly, but the woman did not suspect this. After she found out that her friend had really started to build her future, the girl became very upset and decided to leave the meeting. On her way, she met quite a few employees, and then the man himself, who decided to ask how she was feeling today. He was also curious to know if the lady felt any guilt for the fact that Rose had to leave for another place because of her. The girl was surprised to hear this, but she did not intend to justify herself to the young man, so she just bowed her head and remained silent. After a few minutes, tears began to flow, and she emphasized that she simply did not understand why people treated her so cruelly. Melody began to clutch her head and didn't know what to do because she understood that she had really done something wrong and everyone was blaming her for it. After a while, she simply turned away from the man and apologized, emphasizing that she had to go, and then he felt like a terrible father. The young man was convinced that the girl would not have done such a bad thing and that everything could have been different, but now no one could do anything. Now he was convinced that his daughter would no longer count on him, and he also knew that he had not been with her mother when she died. Sitting in her bed, she began to blame herself for everything she had done, and she was also very ashamed in front of her mother. As soon as she saw the maid, she immediately asked why the woman had come here, since it was the middle of the night. She eagerly began to tell Claire how guilty she felt about the situation that had just happened to her. In the last 3 years of her life, the beautiful woman had never thought about it. But now she had really changed her mind and didn't know what to do. Realizing that the beauty had indeed acted very strangely, the worker decided to support her, and then they began to hug each other. The woman also said that her mother was actually the strongest warrior in the entire empire and that she was very proud of her relative. She also did not forget to add that her parents had always loved their children no matter what, and these words really calmed her down a little. The woman was convinced that despite everything, Melody really needed to look for a much better life that she deserved. After a while, she began to emphasize that the girl needed to sleep in order to restore her emotional state and physical condition. The next morning, the beauty began to truly understand that there were many people in this world who were completely different from what they appeared to be at first glance. But at that moment, she decided to calm down and quietly enjoy the taste of the food. After a while, an employee came to her and asked how she was feeling, but by then the girl already understood that the woman was in a much better state. After a while, she said that a well-known person wanted to meet her very much, and then the man dressed up nicely to meet the girl. As soon as the swordmaster came to her, she immediately invited him to join her for tea and tell her what had brought him there. Of course, he was happy to keep her company, but he didn't dare to speak. The atmosphere between them was a little tense. At one point, she thought he wanted to confess his love for her, and she also thought that she looked very cool when she jumped off the wall. Later, he confessed that he was ready to keep her secret, but instead asked her to listen to his request. He said that he knew very well that the stream had long since disappeared from the empire, and that this was the first time he had seen it in person. As a man, he found it very unpleasant to voice his request, but he really wanted her to duel with him. At that moment, all her dreams of love vanished, and she felt that he suspected her of something, but was afraid to admit it. She was immediately ready to refuse him if it had anything to do with his investigation. The master immediately began to suspect that the princess was probably plotting something or hiding secret information. All this seemed very funny to her because in reality, she did not even communicate with the nobility. After this conversation, her mood changed. And when he was about to leave, he immediately emphasized that His Majesty the Emperor had ordered him to simply cover up the entire investigation, as he knew very well who had actually climbed over the wall. The master thought that the Emperor was probably very concerned about the offender, but did not want it to be so obvious. When the maid found out about the duel, she was sure that it was not necessary to do such a thing, and most importantly, not to climb the walls of the estate. She understood that her family could suffer if someone found out about the stream. Claire said that the Emperor had destroyed all records of the Abu family, but no one had tried to hide the existence of the stream. Therefore, if no one mentioned their family, no one would suffer. But in reality, many of the Emperor's subjects had died, and because of this, his power had become very weak. But the princess was convinced that one had to think only positively and believed that any problem could be solved with the body. Claire was very upset by the princess's answer. She did not understand where the girl could have learned such tricks because she certainly had not taught her that. She assured the princess that His Majesty knew very well that she jumped and about her energy flow, but he certainly did not intend to use his child. The maid always spoke to the princess as if she were her own child, and therefore wanted her to go and talk to her father, because it was time to be brave. After a while, she met with the swordmaster to invite him to the backyard. That was where Claire had everything prepared. Melody confessed that it was her maid who had saved her that day, and that she knew everything about the wall and her energy flow. When he noticed the maid, he realized that she and the princess had been together since childhood, but Claire looked surprisingly young. From the very beginning, she warned him that she had never attended night training and did not know how to use a sword, but she had learned how to use a dagger. At the time, he didn't understand how she could have repelled so many attacks and almost killed one of his knights. That's why she warned him that she couldn't fight him, and that they had to come up with a plan. The swordmaster suggested that she use the energy flow, and he would try his best to repel it with his sword. She looked into his eyes and saw that they were filled with fighting spirit. It was like looking into the eyes of a tiger that was not ready to let go of its prey. As soon as they began their fight, the man did not even realize that everything would happen so quickly. It was not even the dagger, as it was ordinary. The girl had such incredible speed that he couldn't even keep up with her. He could only follow her intuitively. But then something unexpected happened. The princess flew far away, and he was very scared for her. In those moments, he couldn't control his strength because of the pressure she was putting on him. When they sat down to rest, he immediately admitted that no security guard could handle her strength. In fact, she understood that the flow that passed through her body greatly increased his strength. But he couldn't help emphasizing that her fighting style was quite rough. The princess felt that the master was starting to allow himself too much. Just because he was handsome didn't give him the right to be rude to her. A few minutes later, the man was ready to give her a few lessons or start teaching her sword skills. It seemed to her that the world had gone mad if she could still master the sword, but she decided everything that happened in her life herself. The master believed that she had enough talent and therefore thought that it did not matter at all whether she was a man or a woman. When she looked at him, she decided to offer him something better. She would marry him. But the master took it as a joke and decided that it was better not to joke with someone like her. Since everything had turned into a joke, she wanted him to teach her fencing so that they could fight on equal terms. While they were training in one courtyard, the empress enjoyed the silence and tea in the other. The woman had been very tired lately and felt very lonely, and she was also worried about her son, who was just like his father. She cried constantly, thinking that she would never find a girl who was healthy and cheerful enough for her son. After finishing her training, the princess couldn't get enough to eat, and even Claire began to ask her not to rush. Both women were sure that the master really enjoyed training with Melody. But the princess was determined to marry the master anyway and decided to start with friendship. When they were training, the maid realized that her mistress was doing everything right, Perhaps she had to pretend in some places. The master's assistant immediately suspected that he had started seeing someone, as he was behaving rather strangely, constantly trying to leave, but very reluctant to talk about it. Although the man denied everything, the young man knew that he was definitely right, and also reminded him that it was time for tea with Empress Roche. The Empress and her daughter were eagerly awaiting the master swordsman, as the woman really wanted Daisy to catch his eye. When she looked at her daughter, she knew that it was impossible not to fall in love with her. It was Daisy that the captain was supposed to fall head over heels in love with and ask for her hand in marriage, and she was sure that no one could stand in their way. But suddenly, the mother noticed that her daughter had gained a little weight, and this made her very angry. She believed that one had to be as thin as possible. Since the ball was to take place very soon, it was necessary to order several dresses and begin preparations for it. The captain was very surprised that tea was scheduled for him during working hours and that the Empress herself did not show up. Daisy said that her mother was feeling a little unwell, so she came instead. Their conversation was a little dry, and it was mostly the lady who did the talking. But even during the entire time he spent with Daisy, all his thoughts were focused on Melody. The girl tried with all her might to keep the conversation going and decided to bring up fencing, which the captain was very fond of. The girl's mother's words constantly echoed in her head, saying that only thin girls were considered beautiful, which is why Daisy felt uncomfortable. She constantly felt that the master might not like her and was very worried about it, even looking frightened. As soon as tea was over, the captain met Melody, who waved happily and was also glad to see him. The girl immediately warned him that after they finished training, Claire would bring sandwiches and they could have lunch together. As he watched her during training, he realized that simple practice and techniques were not enough. Melody knew all the basics. During the snack break, the master explained that the power of her flow could stop time, but he couldn't explain how it worked. He also wanted her to know that if she used her flow as anger, it could become an incredible and terrifying force. She understood that she could attack her opponent or even just stop them, and that she could do all of this thanks to her energy flow. Melody wanted him to know that time did not stop for her. It simply ceased to affect her, and in that state, she could not touch living beings. If she used her flow against people, she could be hurt immediately, but she could touch raindrops. Then the captain realized that she had no problem with touch, but she had never discussed this with anyone before. At one point, she touched the captain's face with her hand to prove that she posed no threat. Melody noticed that the man felt a little awkward, so she immediately apologized for surprising him so much. Then it seemed to her that she should have started with his shoulder, not his face. When they finished lunch, they continued on their way, but in silence. Then the girl decided that she would not joke with them anymore. No one could have imagined that the man would remain silent. A few minutes later, they said goodbye and were glad that the training had gone well. The girl quickly got ready for her audience with the Empress, as it was the first time in a long time that she had been summoned to a meeting. After Melody's mother died, the Empress began to ignore her existence, and may even have been plotting something against the princess herself. The woman suggested they have tea together, as it was a drink that strengthened women's health and could even rejuvenate them. The Empress had even prepared some tea to take with her as a gift, as it could only be brewed once, because the second time it had no effect at all. When the Empress looked at the girl, she could not understand why she was behaving so calmly. Then Melody decided to confess that she had decided to change, but only her hairstyle and clothes had changed, and she had decided to attend only one meeting. Roche emphasized that it was because of her that the Emperor was very angry, even on the verge of a breakdown, and judging by everything, the princess did not feel guilty at all. The girl understood that there was no point in arguing with her, so she simply agreed with everything she said. Melody was very grateful for the concern, but she understood that it was definitely not coming from the heart, but she did not show it. As soon as the princess looked through the list of all the candidates for her husband, she realized that Kaiser was definitely not among them. The Empress considered Kaiser to be her daughter's fiancé, so she wanted Melody to stay away from him. At that moment, she imagined that Daisy could marry the swordmaster, and just that thought made her feel very sad. Even the maid knew that the princess had chosen Kaiser, because he was very intelligent and very handsome. She wanted a peaceful life for herself with all her might, and had been planning it for almost 3 years, so she was not ready to let anyone get in the way. The princess understood that her conversation with her father had to happen, so she did not want to put it off. She went to his private room. She began to feel a little awkward because she had not seen her father up close for a very long time. When the conversation turned to her escape, he immediately said that he knew about it, but if she did not want to do it, he could pretend that he knew nothing. Then she realized that her father had known that she had been running away from the estate every night, but he hadn't said anything to her or even punished her for her actions. He thought that his daughter had reasons for hiding everything and that her opinion was important to him. The man also hoped that no one else knew about her secrets. His main priority was to protect Melody, and that was the least he could do for her. The princess also confessed that she had completely recovered, but her father did not want her to get caught again and be hurt. But he understood that he couldn't forbid such a crazy girl from doing anything. Soon she couldn't take it anymore and insisted that she wanted to marry the swordmaster and was counting on her father's help in this matter. He believed that if the swordmaster was considered as a future husband, then the only interest in him was because of his fencing skills. As soon as her father heard that she was Kaiser's student, he decided that they only thought about how to swing a sword. The princess couldn't take it anymore and said that the empress's list of grooms wasn't right for her, so she decided to come to her influential dad. She also pointed out that the whole problem was that Daisy also wanted to marry the same guy. Her father emphasized that love was something that could not be given away or compromised, but had to be constantly defended. At the end of the conversation, the emperor finally managed to ask the princess for forgiveness for not being with her mother when she died. The girl was only 8 years old at the time and suffered greatly from loneliness, as her father did not pay her enough attention. Her father's words touched her deeply, and she wanted him to just hug her since he had brought up the subject of his late wife. He felt that he should have taken off his emperor's mask at least once in his life for the sake of his child. He kept asking her for forgiveness for not doing so earlier, and she simply could not hold back her words. The empress did not want to waste any time and immediately showed him a list of all the candidates for their children. He thought his wife had done a good job with the list, but he still wanted to make some changes. Rausha understood that it was not the time to argue with the emperor, so she decided to postpone their conversation until later. His Majesty said that he would call his daughters the next day to discuss the decision he would make regarding their marriage. The empress emphasized that Daisy was not feeling well, so Melody would have to prepare for the ball on her own, but her husband did not object. He noticed that Kaiser was not on the list of suitors for Melody. Therefore, if the empress was the first to announce her daughter's marriage to him, the choice would be hers. The father immediately warned Melody that the decision about her marriage would be made immediately after the New Year holidays. He said the same thing to his wife, suggesting that they leave the subject alone for now and discuss everything with Empress Matilda. As soon as the woman suspected something, she ordered her brother to be contacted immediately. When the princess was left alone, she could not understand why the empress had entrusted her with carrying the golden wreath, but she knew that she would not find the answer. Finding herself near the wall, she was ready to jump again, but as soon as she turned her head, she saw her fencing teacher. She was surprised to see the man she had not seen for so long with her own eyes, and she was truly happy. Without thinking twice, the young man asked why the girl always chose such a strange way to move from one place to another, but she did not really understand. The beauty was convinced that she was doing everything right, because her servants did their job well and always helped the lady in difficult situations. The man, in turn, simply could not turn a blind eye to all this, so he decided that he really needed to talk to her about it. He was also very puzzled by the question of why the girl wanted to join this particular guild, but then she emphasized that she dreamed of having an endless supply of cookies. He was surprised to hear such an answer, and then the beauty noticed that the man had a very strange look that she didn't like at all, but she didn't say anything. Lowering her head, she realized that the man would not let her pass, and then she began to worry very much, but the man continued to stand calmly. Taking a couple of steps away from her, he emphasized that he could still get the cookies and bring them to the girl so she could enjoy them. He also begged her to have at least a little willpower, because it might take some time. Alone with his thoughts, he realized that he had indeed made a promise, but he hadn't even considered that he probably wouldn't be able to keep it. He remembered how the girl had thanked him with great joy for every kind thing he had done for her. After a while, doubts began to arise in the young man's mind that the beauty could stay in this castle for the night, because she had already run away many times. Later, he came to the man and asked if the girl was there, but the worker did not understand what they owed him. As it turned out, the man had only heard the worker's words and actually wanted to take some cookies from him. The young man felt very uncomfortable because he understood that he was to blame for the situation, but the worker remained positive. After that, he took the initiative and offered the man to come to his house and sit for a while to rest after the journey. The manager agreed, but asked the man to tie up his horse because it could run away at any moment. He also emphasized several times that this animal was quite disobedient, but the worker insisted that he always found a common language with animals. When they began to look around carefully, the man noticed that it was a rather interesting place where he felt a little uncomfortable. The man tried to watch the worker very carefully so that he would not make any unnecessary movements, and then he saw that the man wanted to find some delicious cookies. After a few minutes, he finally managed to find a delicious portion of sweets that the man wanted so much to take with him. When he saw how much the worker had put in, he was quite surprised because he had never seen anyone eat so many sweets before. The worker was just trying to do his job well and didn't care whether the girl was watching her health. When he finally returned home, one of the men was very surprised that the manager had brought back so many different boxes. During their conversation, the man explained that they were actually just ordinary cookies that the girl loved very much, and at first no one believed the young man. Everyone had known the girl since childhood, but no one had ever imagined that she loved sweets so much, so everyone was quite pleased. The employee offered his help, but the manager immediately refused and insisted that he would keep everything in his room. Hearing this news, the man was surprised but understood that he could not argue with his boss, so he simply accepted his decision and decided not to say anything more. After their long conversation, the young man began to deny that he wanted to take them to the girl, because he understood that it was better for the workers not to know such information. As soon as his colleague approached him, they immediately began to discuss why the man needed such a large amount of sweets. The next morning, the woman decided to ask her husband why he had not spent the night at home and what had been happening to him lately. The beauty was very worried about her child because she knew that her husband might have some problems that he would never tell anyone about. But before they had time to discuss it, the worker suddenly approached the man again and wanted to tell him something. At that moment, the worker brought the very thing that the young man wanted so badly, but the manager did not expect that all this would happen in front of his mother. After she saw everything with her own eyes, she immediately realized that she wanted to talk to her husband quickly to find out what he was up to. But first, she decided that she needed to discuss it with other people who also played an important role in the household. At first, she decided to calm down, but after a few minutes, she began to tell the story of what had happened to her that morning. The young man concluded that it could have been ordinary volunteer work because he knew very well what a good person the hero was, so he could assume that he was involved in such activities. But the mother had a completely different opinion and did not want to back down, so she realized that something was definitely wrong and wanted to resolve the situation. The man who continued to listen did not know how to react because he was convinced that the woman had no proof that her husband was actually meeting someone else. As soon as she saw the man with her own eyes, she immediately began waving her hands and greeting him. At first, the woman asked the man to wait a little because she needed to take care of some personal matters, and then she wanted to see him again. Inside, the confident manager was actually very nervous and told himself that he would just give her the cookies and leave. After all this, she decided to approach him and ask why he had come to her so early. At that moment, he was speechless, but fortunately the manager gathered his thoughts and emphasized that he wanted to give the girl the long-awaited cookies. She was incredibly happy to hear this news and didn't know how to thank the young man for such a wonderful deed, but he emphasized that he was just keeping his word. A couple of minutes later, he decided that he needed to live because despite everything, he was still quite upset. The next time, the man also told Melody not to climb the wall under any circumstances, but to simply ask him personally for a favor, and then she was very pleased again. Having received her desired sweets, the girl continued to thank him and also emphasized that she would no longer take up his precious time. In another palace, people were discussing events that were gaining momentum and were convinced that their plan was beginning to fall apart before their eyes. The woman was very pleased with what was happening in their kingdom, so she wanted these issues to be resolved as quickly as possible. The man who listened to all the whims did not know how to help properly, because he himself was not very knowledgeable in this matter. He knew that many people in this house were very busy with useless things, so he wanted to start simply expelling some of them from the palace. But the woman was strongly opposed to this decision, because she knew that her son did almost nothing and could fall into this category of people. After some time, he realized that he would not take any steps, but in the future he still wanted to change something because it really had a negative impact on everything. The girl knew that no one else was capable of doing this except the man who had done so many good deeds for her. When she discussed all these issues with the worker, she was surprised to learn that the man had actually been a completely different person before, although he had changed a lot now. Hearing the story of how the Duke gave the girl cookies, the woman was even more surprised and did not know how to react, but she was really happy for the girl. After this story, she decided to ask the girl a few more questions to clearly understand whether the man had really changed for the better. The worker understood that these people who seemed very nice at the moment could actually be completely different people. Upon learning that they had to go on a long trip, Melody was surprised by the news but had no objections. Her main task at that moment was to keep her emotions under control and give clear instructions to her employees, who obeyed her completely. In order to do their job better, the girls asked a few clarifying questions that were essential to know. The woman was happy to tell them everything, but after a while, she began to dislike the fact that people were not listening and could not perform their tasks properly. When she noticed how the horses had been prepared for the long journey, the woman was very dissatisfied because they had not done their job properly. Then the girl in front of her explained to the beauty how it all worked, and how it turned out that the workers had done their job correctly, but the girl just didn't understand. Without thinking twice, they decided to immediately get on the animals and quickly go to the place they needed to go. When they noticed that the beautiful woman had mounted an animal without a seat, the woman said that she knew how to handle it, so there was nothing to be afraid of. It was very hot outside that day, and the man began to feel it himself, which made him unhappy that many people were not doing their jobs properly. He did not expect the preparation to be so poorly done, so he decided that he needed to take matters into his own hands and ask his partner for help. As it turned out, they had to drive for another whole week, and some of them were already very tired and did not want to continue such a difficult journey. One of the men was very aggressive towards the girl and thought that she was just constantly getting in the way, so he wanted the beauty to leave their team. As soon as she heard these words, she immediately started screaming because the princess was convinced that he was just lazy and didn't want to do anything. This angered him even more, and he didn't know how to respond because at that moment, the girl played a more important role than he did. After the lady expressed her position to him, the man began to discuss her a little more quietly with the men who were walking with him. When they finally arrived at their destination, the beauty was very happy because at that moment she could no longer hear her brother, who was constantly dissatisfied with something. The workers, who did their job well, reported that these were all the girl's belongings that she had taken with her. Watching them work, the lady thanked them profusely because she realized that not all people were so sincere and kind to her. After a while, when she had settled down a little in her new surroundings, she suggested to her husband that they rest in the palace they had just built. But before that, she wanted to discuss with the management how long it would take them to get to the kingdom, and when she heard that it would take 7 days, she was surprised. Then she realized that she needed to support her team somehow and offered to join them on the horseback ride the next day. As soon as the man heard these words, he wanted to know if the girl had any experience in horse riding, as it was quite dangerous. After a while, the Duke came to the conclusion that if they did not take the girl's carriage, they would have nowhere to spend the night the next day. As it turned out, this was a problem, and she was convinced that if they really joined forces, they would be able to reach their destination earlier. The men suddenly started looking at the girl, and then she wondered if she had said something wrong, although she herself did not understand what was going on. Eventually, it became quite dark in the area, and the worker asked the man what was wrong, but it turned out that he just wanted some cookies. The worker quickly fulfilled his request and gave him a couple of cookies, and the man wanted to give the rest to the girl so that she could treat herself too. The next morning, everyone woke up in high spirits, and the girl asked the worker if she knew how to ride a horse. When she said yes, they started getting ready for a big ride that would decide their future. After a while, a new man arrived who decided to get to know the other members of the team and introduce himself to them personally. When they began to discuss their plan for the trip, the man noted that the girl had little experience riding such an animal. At that moment, she was not going to listen to anyone and began to defend her position because she wanted to leave as soon as possible. Some men began to emphasize that she was actually a weak woman who was unable to do such work, but this only offended Melody. Realizing that he was simply losing the argument with a woman, the man decided to agree with her and say nothing more. After that, she approached the worker and asked him to leave her one horse. But the man was convinced that the girl could seriously injure herself. All these hurtful words had a very positive effect on her, and she decided to prove to everyone that she really could tame the horse. The man who saw her easily mount the animal was simply shocked and at first could not believe his eyes. Without wasting any time, the girl began to run away from the young men, who in turn gathered a group and began to chase her. Noticing a large group of heroes behind her, she had no intention of stopping, as she was convinced that she could break away. After a while, the lady stopped and asked the men if they still thought she couldn't ride a horse. After she'd truly demonstrated her skills, the girl wanted to know if she could now ride on a par with the men. Now one of them began to treat the girl differently, and at times he was even ashamed because he had truly underestimated her potential. After a while, they all began to hear a very strange sound, and then the man asked everyone to be quiet and not say anything. As it turned out, it was the girl who had started eating her favorite cookies again, and then the young man started laughing at her a little. After a while, she wanted to ask if the man had ever tasted such delicious cookies, but as it turned out, he did not want to answer that question. Turning his head, he noticed how slowly the other workers were doing their jobs, and then the young man wanted them to get their act together. After a while, the lady started asking awkward questions, and then the young man assured her that he didn't want to answer them, and then their conversation stopped for a while. The man did not have clear answers to some questions and did not want to talk about it at all, so he closed his eyes because he was a little ashamed. He recalled some events from his life when his relatives had let him down badly, and then he was forced to talk to them differently. There were also many conflicts in real life, but the man clearly stated that he was not going to give in to anyone under any circumstances. Approaching the worker, he noticed that something was wrong and began to check the bag, from which a lot of strange substances spilled out. The young man was very angry because someone had broken a very expensive bottle of wine, and he wanted to find out who it was. The girl, in turn, admitted that it was her. The manager was shocked to hear this and wanted to hear it again because he thought he had misheard, but the girl simply repeated the same thing. Looking at her, he wanted to know how she could have done such a thing, because the woman had no idea how much it cost. She just lowered her eyes and didn't know what to say, but she tried to say something because she was convinced that it was important at that moment. In a second, she saw the man's hand begin to rise, and then the beauty realized that she was about to be hit. Closing her eyes, the woman was shocked when the prince came up to her, pushed the man's hand away, and wanted to talk to him personally. Finally, he turned back to the girl and said that she would not get away with this so easily because he wanted revenge. A few minutes later, all the other members of the team began to gather around their partners because they wanted to know what had happened. Feeling supported by the men, she even began to joke that someone could have really hit her. But now, fortunately, no one was threatening her. After a while, when everyone had calmed down, the man wanted to ask the girl alone if she had really broken such an expensive drink. As it turned out, the girl had done nothing wrong. She had simply wanted to help a worker who would otherwise have been bullied for the rest of his life. The woman also loved helping people who couldn't stand up for themselves, and the man was very impressed by this. Sometime later, the worker came to him personally and thanked him for saving the girl from the hands of the bad young man. Staying with the beauty, he was convinced that if he had not arrived in time, the woman would have helped the girl in that situation anyway. Looking at the woman, he was convinced that this girl was indeed a very good person who deserved their attention. The man rarely disagreed with the heroine, but at that moment he was completely of the same opinion. After a while, the woman wanted to personally thank the Duke for his wonderful deed, adding that she was convinced that he would come. He, in turn, did not expect such words, and decided to ask if he had heard correctly. But then he heard the same thing. The girl began to laugh loudly and rejoiced that she had finally met some good people with whom she could build a relationship in the future. Hearing all these words, the man thought that the girl simply did not understand what she was saying and that he completely disagreed with her. But she very rudely defended her opinion because she believed that she had not said anything bad about the man at all. After these words, he began to apologize to the girl, and at times he even felt sorry that he had said all this to her face. As they continued their journey, the girl looked up and noticed a large eagle flying above their heads. All the team members were completely satisfied with the atmosphere because at that moment, everyone had started to communicate very well with each other, and the air in the mountains was wonderful. After a while, she even asked the group leader to take her with him next year because she had never seen such landscapes before. The woman, who was trying to fulfill all her duties, walked behind and watched the girl walking calmly ahead. Over time, the beauty began to realize that her mission as a good worker was probably coming to an end, because almost no one was interested in her services. Since childhood, she had raised Melody and instilled only good qualities in her, and also wanted the girl to be able to love someone sincerely. When they arrived in the new area, they immediately decided that they needed to build a fire and analyze what was there. At first, the girl decided to do everything herself, but after a while she realized that she really liked this place. The men were also very pleased, although they hid their emotions and did not want to say anything. Later, he asked Lucas to look at the area from the other side and make sure that their lives were not in danger. The man did all his work quite well, but he never listened to Kaiser because he thought he was a person who often told lies. The young men looked at each other for a long time, but the emperor had a very strong gaze, so after a while the young man simply turned away from him. He often recalled his past, as well as the girl who was actually a completely different person but had changed greatly over time. Melody tried to do her job well, so she wanted to help the man settle into the city as quickly as possible. He, in turn, simply could not control his emotions that day because there were quite a few different events that were weighing on him. When the young man said that he really hoped that the emperor would marry Melody, the man began to shout loudly and asked him to stop talking about it. But the worker did not stop and told another story that actually played a very important role for the man in the future. As it turned out, not only did the emperor's family want him and Melody to marry, but the girl's parents were also very interested in this. The young man talked quite a lot and at times did not even filter what he was saying, but the man listened to everything with great enthusiasm. The hero also did not want to be thought of as a bad person who was simply imposing his opinion, so he emphasized that the emperor had to make the decision himself. At that moment, the man changed greatly. He simply looked at his interlocutor with a normal gaze and did not even know what to say. Later, the young man suggested that Melody go to a different area and see what the scenery was like there. After a while, the girl began to dress in rather prestigious clothes so that she would match her status. The girl was quite happy with this news, but immediately realized that these clothes were actually very uncomfortable. Noticing her reaction, the man quickly approached and asked what was wrong with the girl, but she said nothing. Later, they wanted to know if the girl had noticed any strange smells because there really were some in that area. The woman immediately agreed with their suspicions because she had noticed the strange smells from the very beginning but thought it was normal. The worker immediately became worried because she understood that such a smell could not be normal, so she wanted to observe everything carefully. Fortunately, she had left the forest several years ago, but she always had a bad feeling, and then the woman remembered that this smell was associated with some kind of animal. The young people understood that aerial wolves could be hiding around them, but they were not afraid of them yet, as they did not usually attack first. The girl understood that there was no need to run away yet, but she still had to be very careful. As soon as she leaned toward the young man, she realized that his clothes had a rather unpleasant smell, but it was still a little less than before. At first, he was very surprised by the princess's change in behavior, but after a while, it became clear that she was just being herself. Then she decided to confess that she was tired of wearing dresses and pretending to be very sweet, which was characteristic of a real lady. But at that moment, it even seemed to her that he began to hate her, because in her place there could have been a completely different ally who could have helped him. The princess also confessed that she did not want to be the queen of a completely different empire at all, but simply wanted to stay at home and be a citizen of the Korbel Empire. Now it became clear that she had become a real mad flower, but that was only the beginning of her plan. The young man knew that her sister Rose was the queen of Azen, but he did not understand why Madeline had refused such a stellar path, and he also wanted to know who he was to her. The princess considered him the crown prince, the heir to the throne, and she was his sister, just like Rose and all the others. He tried to assure her that she too would one day find her partner and settle down. The young man could even help her with that if she didn't mind. When he looked at his sister, he realized that she didn't respect him at all, and he wanted to tell her that. As soon as they got a little closer, the brother decided to put all jokes aside and show the princess the real golden wreath that was lying on top of the tree. Then he thought that he should leave his sword, find a ladder, and get the wreath. Without wasting any time, they wanted to get what they had come for as quickly as possible, while the princess tried to hold the ladder. When he looked up, he noticed that the tree was quite tall and it was not easy to reach the wreath. Melody looked at her brother and the tree and realized that the branches at the top were too thin and she wasn't sure they could support the weight of a man. So she decided to help her brother and do it herself. The princess began to climb up the ladder, knowing that it was almost impossible to stop her. As soon as they were both on the same branch, the young man begged her to climb back down because one branch could not support two people. Looking at his sister, he thought she was actually very agile, and on top of that, had great strength in her hands. Once she reached her wreath, she had to grab it and climb down quickly, but for some reason, when she saw it, she just froze in place. In order not to hold it in her hands, the princess decided to put it on her head and hold on to the ladder with both hands. Suddenly, everyone heard the howling of wolves gathering their pack. It was the time of year when their offspring were being born, and they were very anxious, but most of them were afraid of the tigers from the mountains. The woman understood that the wolves would defend themselves to the last, and when they encountered even one enemy, they would not rest until they destroyed him. Therefore, she turned to the commander and realized that they had to find the princess and prince quickly before it was too late. In fact, the young people were already in danger, but they understood that they had to hold on with all their might. As soon as he heard this, he was simply in shock. The maid then tried to explain that the princess had a rather strange tiger-like smell, which is why the wolves reacted to her. The commander's assistant could not believe what he was hearing and thought it was all nonsense because no one was allowed to enter the mountain crevices without permission. She realized that there was no time to explain, so she immediately grabbed her weapon and rushed to rescue her mistress. The commander also decided not to wait long, ordered the horses to be saddled and to follow him quickly, but the assistant believed that only members of the royal family were allowed to enter that sacred place. He understood that he could be committing a crime, but leaving Melody in trouble was much worse, so it was impossible to say which crime was worse. Meanwhile, she began to feel cold sweat running down her back and the blood in her veins began to boil. She quietly crouched down and tried to ask her brother to quickly get his sword, but he did not hear her. When her brother noticed her, he did not understand why she was so tense but decided to listen anyway. Turning around, they both saw that they were surrounded by a huge pack of wolves, which began to slowly approach them. The princess decided to attack the smallest wolf, as it must have been very weak. But everything turned out completely differently, and the wolves attacked them first. The prince could not believe his eyes that his sister could not only attack a wolf with one blow, but kill it. Then he decided to calm down and prepare for battle. He understood that the smell of blood only intensified the wolves' anger. Therefore, they had to get out of there as quickly as possible. The wolves surrounded the prince and princess and took them by surprise. The beasts tried to target the girl because of her size, but when she fought back, several of them turned on her brother. The boy was not as strong and could not even handle the one wolf in front of him. Another tried to attack him from behind and simply bite his neck. Melody knew she could save him, but then he would definitely find out about her crazy energy. But this was no time to think about her secrets. They had to save themselves with all their might. He simply couldn't believe that the wolves had stopped in one place, but the princess couldn't hold out for long. They had to get closer to the water. They needed to quickly get rid of their clothes, then the wolves would have no choice but to retreat. The brother then remembered that there was a river in the crevice of the mountain, so they had to hurry there. Melody began to feel like she was suffocating. Her body was becoming too weak, and the ringing in her ears grew louder, and she could no longer use the energy flow. The princess collapsed in an instant and could not even move, while her brother was in complete despair and did not know what to do next. She knew that the wolves would get to them when she passed out, so she had to quickly wash the tiger's scent off her clothes, but the princess begged him not to leave her alone. The deeper they went into the forest, the more they began to smell blood. The wolves were right in front of them and tried to attack them with all their might, but the captain immediately managed to use his sword and kill them all. When he looked around, he didn't understand why there was no one around and there was blood everywhere. A little later, he even found the prince's sword and the princess's cloak. The master understood that the prince and princess must be all right, because they were much stronger than they seemed at first glance. Claire understood that her princess knew that the animals were attacking because of the smell, so she must have approached the river in the crevice of the mountain. He was constantly worried that something might happen to the girl, and then he would definitely be removed from all duties. His heart could have jumped out of his chest from the excitement. As soon as they washed their clothes, they were completely wet and could easily freeze to death. The young man decided that they needed to find shelter quickly. It seemed to him that if he just followed the river upstream, he could reach the camp, but there he might run into a trap, and only he could escape. The princess was unconscious. The girl couldn't even open her eyes. A lot had happened to them during that time, but the wreath was still on her head. At that moment, it seemed to him that she thought he was irresponsible if she thought he would leave her and save himself. The boy quickly managed to build a fire, and now they would definitely not freeze to death. He stared at her the whole time and couldn't believe that his sister possessed such powerful energy. In fact, he had never seen anything like it before. That's why the wolf he had killed with a single blow wasn't really that important compared to her energy. Melody tried to carefully hide all her abilities, as if keeping a trump card for the future, but she still had to save her brother, knowing that it could end very badly for her. It was then that he realized that she was his true ally, and he really wanted her to be on his side when he came to his senses. Very quickly, Claire and the captain found the place where the prince and princess had washed away their scent, but there weren't many traces left. The captain understood that only one of them could have left, but he also understood that the emperor's children had not gone to the camp and were hiding somewhere nearby. Then he began to shout loudly, hoping that they could hear him, and he was right. The prince responded immediately. The swordmaster ran toward the voice and saw that the princess was lying on the ground without any signs of life. They all noticed that her face was very pale and her lips were blue, but when Claire bent over her, she felt that the girl was still alive. The swordmaster could not allow anyone else to carry the princess except him, so every time he helped her, he felt like a real hero. As soon as he picked her up, he realized that the princess was much lighter than he had imagined. He felt that the girl was barely breathing, so he told Claire about it. The woman said that their mistress's temperature had dropped significantly, and her body was trying to conserve what little energy it had left. The master understood well that an ordinary person would have no chance of survival, but the princess was much stronger than anyone else. Suddenly he realized that all his attention was focused on the girl, and he had completely forgotten about the prince. But the prince thought that everything was fine with him, and wanted the master to take care of her first and take her to the camp. The commander ordered his assistants to accompany the prince, while he would personally take care of the princess. Even through all her clothes, he could feel that her body was too cold. The princess's brother immediately noticed that something was definitely wrong, because the commander had never been so confused in battle, so he decided that it must have something to do with the princess. He also thought that if Empress Rosha found out about this, she would surely go mad with rage. She had fought tooth and nail for every meeting between her daughter and Kaiser. Then he finally understood the significance of the precious crown on the princess's head. As soon as they arrived at the camp, they immediately asked for plenty of warm water, towels, and a change of clothes. They also needed to build a fire and prepare warm bedding. When Claire looked at the commander, she realized that he was not even trying to hide his concern for the princess. The maid understood that he knew for sure that Melody possessed a flow of energy, but now her body was completely exhausted, and the consequences could be irreversible if she remained there. He was very worried, but he understood that the girl was very strong and would definitely cope. The commander's assistant begged the prince on his knees for forgiveness, saying that they might not have been able to save him if it weren't for Mr. Wendell. But His Highness the Prince understood that they were not to blame at all, and that no one could have anticipated the attack of the beasts, so there were no guilty parties in that situation. The young man wanted to leave everything in the past, and asked that the wreath be kept intact and not lost. When the prince and the master were left alone, the prince immediately asked that what had happened be kept secret, especially the attack by the wolves. He wanted everyone to pretend that the situation had never happened. The prince assured him that the wolves had torn the sacred clothes to pieces, and the stand under them had simply burned down, so there was no evidence to search for the criminals. He was confused and did not understand what was the right thing to do, because if everyone found out what had happened, he would surely be punished. The prince immediately said that he had gained nothing from the incident, so he was ready to protect the master's reputation. The most important thing for him was that they had ruined their enemies' plans, which was a kind of victory in itself. Then the commander realized that the death of the princess and the prince was someone's plan. They had been killed with the help of wolves, which had been attracted by a specific smell. He believed that it could only have been Queen Rosha.